The first time I saw Caleb, my heart skipped a beat, but not for the reason you'd expect. It wasn't pride or joy. It was fear. Fear because the baby in the nurse's arms didn't look like me. It was a humid July afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jasmine had just gone through 14 hours of labor at Presbyterian Medical Center. The room smelled of antiseptic and something strangely sweet, like hope and exhaustion combined. I held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragements, told her I loved her. We were exhausted but alive, and in a few minutes, we would be parents. I thought that was all I ever wanted. I'm Ethan Miller. I'm white, 30, a software engineer with a decent job, and a mind that loves logic more than emotions. Jasmine, my wife, is 31, black, a second-grade teacher with the patience of a saint and the fire of a preacher's daughter. We'd met 2 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. Fell in love over shared playlists and debates about Malcolm Gladwell. Got married after a whirlwind year because we were pregnant with Caleb. When the nurse placed Caleb in my arms, I stared at him. Dark skin, darker than Jasmine's, thick curls, almond-shaped eyes. He looked beautiful. But he didn't look like me. My heart should have swelled. Instead, it sank. I didn't say anything. Just smiled for the pictures, kissed Jasmine on the forehead, and swallowed my doubt like poison. The first few weeks at home were a blur of sleepless nights and learning how to be a father. I changed diapers, warmed bottles, rocked Caleb to sleep, and told myself it didn't matter. But every time I looked at him, something gnawed at me. My mother visited and said nothing at first. Then one day, while Jasmine napped, she looked at Caleb and asked, "Are you sure, Ethan? He doesn't have a trace of you." I laughed it off, said genetics were funny like that. But her words echoed louder each night. And even though Jasmine never gave me a reason to doubt her, the doubt came anyway. It was a Tuesday night. Caleb was 4 weeks old. He wouldn't stop crying. I walked him up and down the hallway, singing badly, humming lullabies. And out of nowhere, I whispered, "Are you really mine?" His eyes locked onto mine. Just a baby. But it felt like he knew. I told myself it was stress. First-time dad nerves. Postpartum confusion. Except I wasn't the one who gave birth. So I buried the thought. I went back to work, came home, helped with Caleb, played the part. But inside, I was slipping. I started searching for articles about genetics, biracial kids, inheritance of features. I told myself it was curiosity, but it wasn't. It was obsession. I needed an answer to a question I didn't want to admit I was asking. I never said anything to Jasmine. Not then. She looked so happy, so sure, and I couldn't bring myself to shatter that. But I also couldn't shake the feeling. It followed me like a shadow. And I knew deep down that someday I would need to know for sure. I just didn't know that needing the truth would eventually destroy everything else I loved. Lily looked exactly like me. That's when everything truly began to unravel. 2 years had passed since Caleb's birth. We were still living in the same 2-bedroom house in Charlotte. Jasmine decorated the nursery herself. Soft green walls, white wooden crib, sunlight spilling through linen curtains. Caleb was a vibrant toddler now, full of questions and clumsy hugs. Jasmine was pregnant again, glowing with that second-time mother calm. Lily was born on a brisk spring morning. Her hair was fine and light brown. Her skin, pale with a pink undertone. But it was her eyes that stole my breath. Ice blue, just like mine. When I held her, I felt something snap back into place inside me. A connection I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Caleb was the first to meet her. He peeked into the bassinet with wide eyes and whispered, "Baby?" He smiled, then looked up at me. For a moment, I felt whole. But that moment didn't last. The contrast between Lily and Caleb was impossible to ignore. Family and friends all made comments. "She's Ethan's twin." "No doubt about who the daddy is this time, huh?" They laughed. I didn't. I tried to ignore the spiral happening inside me, but it was like Lily's presence highlighted everything I had tried to suppress. Every time she curled into my arms, I felt warmth and guilt. I began comparing them. Lily took to me instantly, giggling when I entered the room, falling asleep on my chest. With Caleb, it had always been more strained. Or maybe I had made it that way. Jasmine was too tired to notice at first. She was recovering, juggling diapers and late-night feedings. I was the supportive husband on the outside, but inside I was drowning. One night, I found myself staring at old baby photos of myself. Then Jasmine. Then Caleb. I traced the features with my finger like I was solving a puzzle. Then it happened. We were at the park. Caleb fell off the monkey bars. He didn't cry right away, just ran toward me. And I hesitated, just for a split second. But it was enough. Jasmine noticed. She ran to Caleb, cradled him, shot me a look I couldn't decipher. Later that night she asked, "Is something wrong between you and Caleb?" I lied, said I was tired, said work was stressful. But she knew. I could see it in her eyes the next morning when she handed me Caleb's lunchbox. Something had shifted. A line had been drawn. I started researching paternity tests in secret, looked into labs, read reviews. I told myself I just wanted peace of mind, that it was better to know than wonder. The kid arrived in a discreet envelope. Jasmine was taking the kids to her sister's for the weekend. It was the perfect time. I stood in the hallway, Caleb's toothbrush in one hand, guilt in the other. "Just one test," I whispered. "Then this will all go away." But I didn't know then. The test wouldn't fix anything. It would tear everything apart. It wasn't just a test for Caleb's DNA. It was a test of who I really was. The house was silent, too silent. Jasmine and the kids had left that morning, and I was standing in the hallway alone. The envelope from the lab sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded gun. My hands trembled as I picked it up. There was no one else in the house. Just me, my thoughts, and a guilt that felt heavier than any weight I'd ever lifted. I told myself this was about truth, about clarity. But part of me knew better. This wasn't about Caleb. This was about my own weakness. I opened the envelope. Inside was the swab kit. Instructions, too detailed. Gloves. Vial. It felt clinical, cold. Everything fatherhood wasn't supposed to be. I went into the bathroom, opened Caleb's drawer, and pulled out his toothbrush. I stood there for what felt like hours, looking at myself in the mirror, at the man I was, at the father I had claimed to be. I dipped the swab into the bristles, sealed it in the tube, and packed it all back up. As I sealed the return envelope, I felt something crack. I dropped it off at the mailbox down the street, heart pounding like I was committing a crime. The next week was torture. Every knock at the door, every ping on my phone. I flinched. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I'd stare at Caleb when he wasn't looking, trying to guess, hoping, dreading. When the email finally arrived, I almost didn't open it. But I did. 99.99% probability of paternity. I dropped my phone. I laughed. Then I cried. God, I cried. Not because I was relieved, though I was, but because I had wasted years, because I had failed my son, because I had failed my wife, because I had let fear make me doubt the people who loved me most. I held Caleb tighter that night, kissed his forehead twice, told him I loved him even though he was half asleep. The test had given me the truth, but it couldn't undo what I had already broken. She said she loved me. Then I told her about the test, and I watched that love die in her eyes. It had been a few weeks since the test results came in. Things at home felt lighter. Caleb and I were closer than ever. I'd started reading to him every night, building Lego towers on the weekend, even coaching his baby soccer league. For the first time, I felt like a real dad. Jasmine noticed. She even smiled more. Touched my arm in the kitchen, asked if I wanted to try for a third. It was the life I thought we were building, the life I'd almost thrown away. That Sunday evening, the kids were in bed early. Jasmine and I sat on the porch, sipping tea under fairy lights. She wore my old hoodie. Her head rested on my shoulder. And that's when the guilt caved in. I had the truth, but not the honesty. I had fixed my heart, but not our foundation. I turned to her and said, "Jas, I need to tell you something." She looked up, curious. What is it? I swallowed. I got a paternity test. For Caleb. Her eyes didn't widen. Her face didn't crumple. She just froze. Like the whole porch dropped 10 degrees. She stood up slowly, arms crossed. When? Back when you took the kids to your sister's. A few weeks ago. And? He's mine. Of course he's mine. I know that now. She laughed. It was the kind of laugh that didn't reach the eyes. You didn't know that before? Did you ever doubt Lily? She asked, her voice rising. No, because... I stopped myself. Because she's white? Her voice cracked. I didn't mean it like that. But that's what it is, isn't it? Caleb didn't look enough like you, so you thought I cheated. You thought I'd lie. You thought I'd trap you. She started crying, angry tears that burned as they fell. You looked at your own son for 5 years and saw a question mark. I looked at you and saw a father. I'm sorry, I said, over and over. I was scared. I didn't trust myself. I was wrong. She shook her head. No, Ethan. You didn't trust me. You didn't trust your son. And now I can't trust you. She went inside, packed a duffel bag with mechanical precision, went into the kids' room, kissed them. Then she turned to me. After quarantine, I'm taking them. I need space. I need air. And you need to think about who you really are. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't face our bedroom. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her crying down the hall. The test hadn't just been a test of paternity. It had been a test of love, of loyalty, of belief, and I had failed every single one. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just packed, and that silence was worse than any goodbye. The days after our fight passed like fog. Jasmine stopped speaking to me unless it was about the kids. She avoided eye contact, wore her emotions like armor, and slept in Lily's room every night. Caleb noticed. Lily noticed. I noticed most of all. I tried to pretend this was just a storm passing through. But deep down I knew it wasn't weather. It was a fault line, and it had cracked open beneath our home. Jasmine became a ghost in the house we built. Still present, still mothering, but somewhere else entirely. I became a shadow, orbiting around her silence. The kids were confused, Caleb especially. He started asking questions. Why isn't Mommy eating dinner with us? Why does Daddy sleep on the couch? I gave vague answers, lies dressed as comfort, but he saw through them. One morning, Jasmine handed me a sheet of paper. It was a schedule, our shared custody outline for the coming months. She said she'd found an apartment near her sister's, that she'd be moving out at the end of the month. It hit me harder than any argument ever could. I begged her to reconsider. I offered therapy, counseling, a reset. She listened politely, then said, Ethan, I don't think you understand. I'm not asking, I'm informing. I tried talking to her mother, hoping she'd advocate for us, but I only received a long pause, followed by a quiet, You broke something sacred. She trusted you with her whole self. The next few weeks were unbearable. Every room was a reminder. Every quiet evening felt like a countdown. I kept waiting for some sign, for her to change her mind. Moving day arrived. A Saturday. Overcast sky. No birds, no breeze, just stillness. Her sister pulled into the driveway with a rental van. Jasmine loaded boxes while I tried to keep the kids distracted inside. But Caleb kept looking out the window. Is Mommy going on a trip? He asked. I couldn't answer. Jasmine knelt beside him, kissed his forehead, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she stood up, looked me in the eye for the first time in weeks, and said, Goodbye, Ethan. The van drove away. I stood in the doorway until it disappeared. Inside, the house echoed. Her scent still lingered in the hall. Lily's drawings still hung on the fridge. Caleb's favorite blanket was draped across the armrest where she used to read to him. And me? I was just there. A man standing in the aftermath of his own undoing. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room, touching walls like they were memories. I replayed every word I'd said, Every moment I should have said more. She left because I couldn't trust what mattered most. Now I was alone, with the truth I'd asked for, and the family I'd lost because of it. I thought counseling would fix us, but some wounds don't heal with words. It had been nearly 2 months since Jasmine moved out. The kids stayed with her during the week and spent weekends with me. The silence in my house was now routine, but when Jasmine suggested couples therapy, for closure, she said, I latched onto it like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. We met every Wednesday at 6 p.m. in a small beige office downtown. A clock ticked too loudly. The couch cushions sighed when we sat down. And Dr. Nadia, our therapist, had the kind of calm that made you uncomfortable with your own noise. Dr. Nadia was in her 50s, a black woman with a quiet strength. She looked at us not as problems to fix, but as people unraveling slowly. Jasmine wore her distance like a necklace, calm, composed, professional. She spoke in measured tones. I, on the other hand, showed up with my desperation leaking through every sentence. From the first session it was clear. Jasmine wasn't there to heal the marriage. She was there to process the ending. I can't forget what he did, she said. Dr. Nadia asked her, Do you still love him? Jasmine didn't answer right away. Then, softly, I don't know, but I know I don't feel safe loving him anymore. We unpacked everything. My distrust, my silence, her heartbreak. The nights I stared at Caleb, questioning him instead of loving him. The mornings she carried both kids while I carried my doubt like a loaded gun. I cried more than I expected. Jasmine didn't. One week, Dr. Nadia asked me, What was it you feared most when you looked at your son? I paused. That I'd been fooled. That I wasn't enough. That he wasn't mine. Because deep down, I thought I didn't deserve something so good. The session that broke me came 6 weeks in. Dr. Nadia asked Jasmine, Do you believe trust can be rebuilt? Jasmine stared at the carpet. Then she looked at me. I believe people can grow. I believe Ethan can be a better father, a better man. But a husband? No. I don't see that anymore. I wanted to scream, to plead, but I nodded. Because even I had started to believe it. After that, counseling became more about co-parenting than reconciliation. We discussed school schedules, holidays, emotional health for the kids. I learned how to listen, really listen. I stopped begging for another chance, started focusing on how to show up for my children, even if it wasn't from the same house. Jasmine filed for divorce a month later, amicably, peacefully, tragically. I signed the papers without crying, because by then, I understood. Losing her was the price I paid for doubting the people who gave me every reason to trust. And some prices, you carry forever. Divorce isn't just the end of love. It's the death of the future you once dreamed of. I moved into a small apartment on the east side of Charlotte. 1 bedroom, peeling paint, a view of the back alley. It wasn't home, not really. But it was where I started over. The kids visited every other weekend. The rest of the time it was just me, my thoughts, and the silence I'd earned. Caleb had turned 8. Tall for his age, fast, obsessed with soccer. He wore his emotions on his sleeve. Lily was 6 and fearless. She loved gymnastics, drawing, and telling me when my socks didn't match. They made the place feel full, briefly. I was still working remote in tech support, having left my old role during the worst of my depression. I took long walks, read parenting books, cried more than I'd admit to anyone. I couldn't stop missing Jasmine. Even though we no longer talked beyond scheduling, her absence echoed through everything. I dreaded the day she'd meet someone new. The idea of another man tucking my daughter into bed or watching Caleb's game made me physically ill. But more than that, I dreaded the moment my kids would ask questions I couldn't answer. One afternoon, Caleb and I were eating pizza after his soccer practice. He looked up and asked, Dad, why don't you and Mom live together anymore? I froze, took a long sip of soda. Sometimes adults stop being good at loving each other the right way, I said. But we both love you. That'll never change. He nodded slowly, then quieter. Did it have anything to do with me? I nearly choked on the crust. No, never. Not even a little. Later that night, as I tucked Caleb into bed, he looked up at me and said, "You seem happier now, but also sadder." And I didn't know what to say, because he was right. I tried to be present. I went to every school play, every soccer match. I packed their lunches with dumb notes that said, "Super Dad believes in you," and drew badly sketched capes. But the guilt never left. I saw it in the way Caleb sometimes stared at me, as if trying to solve a puzzle, and I prayed he'd never learn the truth about the test, that it would stay buried like a bad dream. Sometimes I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos, ones where Jasmine was laughing, Caleb was on my shoulders, Lily in her arms. That life was gone, but the kids were still here, and if there was anything left to rebuild, it would start with being the father they deserved, even if I wasn't the husband I should have been. Sometimes healing means saying things, even if they'll never be heard. It was a Sunday night. Rain tapped against the window of my apartment. The kids were gone, back with Jasmine. I had just finished doing the dishes when I felt it again. That ache. Not pain. Not anger. Just absence. The shape of something I once held and no longer could. So I sat at my desk, opened a notebook, and began writing a letter I would never send. In the letter, I addressed her as Jazz, just like the old days, the way I said her name when we used to slow dance in the kitchen. I didn't write with hope of reconciliation. I wrote because the words were too heavy to carry anymore. "I'm sorry," I began. Not just for the test, but for what came before it. The doubt I never voiced, the distance I let grow, the way I looked at Caleb and saw questions when I should have only seen my son. I told her that my failure wasn't just in action, it was in faith. I didn't just betray her trust. I betrayed the family we were trying to become. I wrote about the mornings I missed her laugh, the nights I still woke thinking she was next to me. I wrote about Lily's cartwheels in the hallway, and how Caleb kicked his first goal and looked for her in the stands. I told her I wasn't angry she left. I understood. And that was the hardest part. "Some days I think I've healed," I wrote. "Other days I see a photo of you holding Caleb the day he was born, and I fall apart all over again." Toward the end, I wrote the words I had never said aloud. Not to her, not to the kids, not even to myself. "You were right to leave." Because in that moment, I understood that love alone isn't enough. Trust is the scaffolding that holds it up, and I had kicked the supports out from under us. I ended the letter simply. "Thank you for giving me Caleb and Lily. They are my redemption. I'll spend the rest of my life earning what I already have, their love." I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, wrote her name on the front, then tucked it into the back of my drawer, behind tax forms and old receipts. A truth I had finally told, even if no one would read it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because anything changed, but because I had finally said goodbye, not just to her, but to the man I had been, the one who let fear whisper louder than love. Now, I'm just a dad, a flawed, broken, better man, and maybe that's enough.